Growing up in Britain back in the 60s meant stepping into a world where the doctor's surgery felt like one of the most serious places a child could ever be. A room filled with the faint smell of polish, paper notes stacked neatly on a desk older than time itself, and that little black bag resting beside the doctor's chair with an authority all of its own. Children didn't question doctors. Parents didn't second-guess them, and even the smallest instruction carried the weight of absolute truth. It was a time when medical knowledge was trusted implicitly, when advice was given with the warmth of confidence rather than the coldness of regulation, and when treatments reflected a world that was doing its best with the information it had at hand. Looking back now, many of those treatments and habits feel almost impossible to imagine through a modern lens, not because the doctors were careless, but because the boundaries that shape medical practice today were still decades away from being drawn. The result is a collection of memories that feel both comforting and astonishing, a reminder of just how much the world has changed and how different the art of caring for people once was. Number 1. Alcohol as a comforting remedy for children. Among the many things parents discussed with reassuring nods in the doctor's waiting room, the idea of easing a child's discomfort with a little alcohol was completely ordinary. A tiny drop of whiskey rubbed gently onto teething gums, a small spoon of brandy stirred into warm milk for a restless child, or a whisper of something stronger to settle the nerves during a feverish night. All of it felt reasonable. Doctors offered the advice softly, with the calm tone of someone speaking from long experience, and parents followed it without hesitation. The warmth of the whiskey, the way it soothed a crying baby, the sense that it provided a moment of peace. Today, the idea lives somewhere between disbelief and concern. But back then, it was simply another thread in the fabric of daily care, woven from tradition, trust, and the steady belief that it did more good than harm. Number 2. Codeine and morphine for childhood ailments. If the gentle remedies of the drinks cupboard sound surprising, the bottles sitting on the doctor's shelves were even more so. There were cough syrups with ingredients no pharmacist would even whisper about today, and tiny tablets that promised relief for everything from aching limbs to restless nights. A child with a stubborn cough might be given something with codeine. A child in pain might receive a drop or two of a mild morphine derivative. Parents carried home those medicines with quiet gratitude, measuring doses carefully with a teaspoon, trusting completely in the doctor who had sealed the bottle with a firm twist of his wrist. There were no childproof caps, no bold red warnings, no endless lists of side effects. Just simple instructions written in steady handwriting and a belief that the medicine inside would bring rest and comfort. It usually did, though in ways that feel decidedly out of place from a modern point of view. Number 3. The shoe shop X-ray box. One of the most unusual intersections between medicine and daily life didn't happen in a clinic at all, but in the high street shoe shop, where children would slide their feet into a wooden box and peer into a glowing viewfinder to see the shining outline of their own bones. Parents watched the tiny skeleton wriggle its toes, shop assistants nodded approvingly, and even doctors saw the value in ensuring a proper fit. The gentle hum of the machine, the warm light, the way it turned an ordinary shopping trip into something magical. These memories stayed with everyone who grew up during that time. Only later did the world begin to understand the risks, and the machines disappeared quietly, leaving behind a sense of disbelief that something once considered helpful could vanish so completely from everyday life. Number 4. Slimming tablets that were anything but gentle. In the 60s, the landscape of health advice was shifting quickly, and many doctors embraced the new wave of slimming tablets that promised energy, focus, and effortless weight loss. The pills arrived in small glass bottles with neatly folded labels, described as a little boost for busy women trying to manage work, family, and the 1,000 small tasks that filled a household. What no one found unusual at the time was that these tablets were, in truth, built from ingredients that today would sit very firmly on the list of controlled substances. Women felt brighter, lighter, more alert. The doctor nodded approvingly, and no one imagined that the tiny tablets might one day become a symbol of how different the boundaries of medicine once were. Looking back, it feels almost surreal that something so powerful could be handed out with such gentle reassurance. Number 5. House calls made after an evening at the pub. Doctors in the 60s were woven into the community in a way that feels rare today. They lived on the same streets, chatted with the same neighbors, and often finished their dinners at the same pub where their patients gathered. If someone rushed in calling for help, the doctor would rise instantly, apologize politely, and head out the door without a second thought. Sometimes that meant visiting a home after sharing a drink or two, not as negligence, but as a reflection of how intertwined life was in those days. The doctor arrived with his little bag, smelling faintly of the pub, and families welcomed him with gratitude, never considering that anything was amiss. It was a world built on trust and proximity rather than regulations and protocols, and for better or worse, it shaped countless memories of late-night knocks on the door and quiet footsteps on the stairs. Number 6. Cigarettes in the hospital ward. Stepping into a hospital ward in the 60s meant stepping into a haze that drifted gently through the air, mingling with the smell of disinfectant and the rustle of crisp bedsheets. Patients smoked while sitting up in bed, visitors smoked as they chatted by the window, and nurses carried small ashtrays on their rounds to keep things tidy. Even doctors would occasionally light a cigarette while discussing someone's progress, holding the glowing tip away from their coat with practiced ease. No one questioned it. Smoke was part of life, part of the rhythm of conversation, part of the culture. Today, the sight would seem impossible, but back then, it felt strangely comforting, a reminder that hospitals were places filled with people living ordinary lives, even while being cared for. Number 7. When doctors believed smoking helped you relax. Long before research painted a clearer picture, many doctors genuinely believed that certain cigarettes could calm the nerves, soothe digestion, or offer a quiet moment of relief during stressful days. Advertisements echoed this belief with bold claims about relaxation, and patients listened with trust that was rooted more in culture than in chemistry. A doctor might quietly recommend a particular brand to someone feeling overwhelmed or sleepless, and the advice carried no more drama than suggesting an evening walk or a cup of warm tea. It is one of the clearest examples of how medical understanding evolves, and how even well-meaning guidance can transform into something unimaginable when viewed through the clarity of hindsight. Number 8. Instruments, cleaned with nothing more than a quick wipe. Medical rooms in the 60s looked very different from today's spotless clinics filled with sealed packets and sterile packaging. A doctor might prepare to remove a splinter, stitch a cut, or lance a painful boil using tools kept neatly in his black bag, wiping them on a cloth or briefly dipping them into a bottle of iodine before beginning. The care was real, the intention was sincere, and the belief was that a quick wipe was both sensible and sufficient. Infections certainly happened, but they were accepted as part of life, not as the result of protocols ignored or rules broken. It was a world where effort mattered more than equipment, and where the doctor's steady hand inspired more confidence than any sterilization label ever could. Number 9. Smoking allowed, even during childbirth. The delivery room in the 60s had a kind of quiet chaos to it, with mothers concentrating through the pain, nurses moving briskly from one task to another, and fathers trying their best to stay calm. Amid all of this, it was not unusual for a man to light a cigarette while waiting for the next instruction, letting the smoke drift slowly across the room. Doctors and nurses barely noticed. It was simply part of life. It feels unbelievable now, almost theatrical, yet it was entirely ordinary at the time. Another reminder of how dramatically norms can shift within a single lifetime. Number 10. Treatments, without a single consent form. Today, every medical procedure, no matter how small, comes wrapped in explanations, warnings, signatures, and forms designed to ensure clarity and consent. In the 60s, such paperwork was practically non-existent. The doctor explained what needed to be done with calm authority, the patient nodded, and the treatment began. Appendix removals, bone setting, stitches, even small surgical procedures, all carried out through spoken trust rather than written agreement. It wasn't a lack of care, it was simply the culture, a time when respect for expertise overshadowed the need for formalities. Looking back, the absence of paperwork feels startling, yet it created a kind of simplicity that many people remember with surprising fondness. Number 11. Barbiturates for sleepless nights and troubled minds. There was a period in the 60s when barbiturates were handed out with the same gentle assurance that modern doctors reserve for mild painkillers. The tablets came in small glass bottles with labels that felt more friendly than foreboding, and they were given to people who were simply tired, overwhelmed, or struggling to rest. Doctors believed they were offering comfort and relief, and patients accepted the tablets with gratitude, often unaware of how powerful the medicines truly were. It was a time when medical practice leaned heavily on trust, and when the line between remedy and risk was drawn with far softer strokes than it is today. Number 12. Sunburn as a treatment for certain ailments. There was a widely held belief in the 60s that a bit of sun did wonders for just about everything. Skin conditions, low mood, poor circulation, and general weariness. Doctors encouraged pale patients to get a bit of color. Parents nodded approvingly, and the sight of children returning from holiday with pink noses and peeling shoulders was treated as proof that the sunshine had done its job. The gentle pride people felt in those rosy faces seems strange now, especially given what is known about sun exposure. Yet in that moment, it felt wholesome and natural. A simple treatment drawn from nature rather than a medicine bottle. Number 13. Medicines without childproof caps. The medicine cupboard in a 1960s household was a place filled with glass bottles, metal tins, and labels written in tiny lettering. Sleeping pills, tonics, painkillers, ointments, all stored within reach of curious little hands, with no locks, no warnings, and certainly no childproof caps. Doctors didn't emphasize storage, parents didn't worry unduly, and manufacturers didn't imagine a world where tamper-proof containers would become standard. It was only later, after many tragedies, that safety began to change. Looking back, the open shelves feel astonishing, yet they were completely ordinary at the time. Number 14. Smoking in GP waiting rooms. The waiting room at the doctor's surgery held its own particular atmosphere. Wooden chairs with arms polished smooth by decades of elbows, a low table covered in well-thumbed magazines, and a gentle cloud of cigarette smoke hanging in the air like a quiet presence. Patients smoked as they waited, tapping ash into small metal trays, and the smell of tobacco felt every bit as normal as the scent of disinfectant drifting from the consultation room. It was a place where daily habits followed people indoors without question, and where the boundaries between public health and personal comfort had not yet been drawn with modern precision. Number 15. When women's pain was dismissed as nerves. Among the many habits of medical practice that now feel astonishing, one of the most quietly revealing is the way women's pain was often interpreted through the narrow lens of nerves, female weakness, or simply being overly tired. A woman describing persistent discomfort might be reassured kindly rather than investigated thoroughly, and the treatment offered might be a tonic, a sedative, or advice to rest more. It wasn't cruelty, it was the medical framework of the time, shaped by assumptions no one questioned. Yet it meant that countless women carried burdens silently, trusting that the doctor's gentle reassurance was all the help that could be given. When you look back on medical life in the 60s, the details form a strange mixture of comfort and surprise, a world built on trust, simplicity, and habits that now feel unimaginable. Doctors weren't reckless, and they certainly weren't indifferent. They worked with the knowledge and tools they had, offering care that was shaped as much by culture as by science. The waiting rooms, the house calls, the little glass bottles, The advice passed down with a warm nod. All of it belongs to a chapter of British life that feels impossibly distant and yet intimately familiar to anyone who lived through it. Perhaps the real reminder is not how unusual those practices seem today, but how deeply the human side of medicine has stayed the same. The wish to comfort, the hope to heal, and the memory of a time when even the simplest remedy felt like an act of kindness.